Today we're going to have a look at how we can interpret information from line graphs. So let's begin. To begin with, I want you to consider the following situation. What if Ben takes Rocky to the shops to buy some new football boots before then dropping him at football practice? Ben then drives home. This graph that I've got in front of me shows Ben's distance from home over a 70-minute period. Now, as you can see on the graph, there are 5 significant points that's been marked out as A, B, C, D and E. At point A, Ben is currently home and that's his starting point. And then at point E, that's where Ben finishes, which is also at his home. So at points B, C and D are other significant points on his journey. Now, your first question you've been asked is, what is Ben doing between points B and C? Well, let's start at point A. At point A and B, Ben is travelling to the shops. So at point B, Ben arrives at the shops. Hence the reason between point B and C, he doesn't actually move any further away. So what is Ben doing between points B and C? Well, he must be buying those footy boots. So if we continue on his journey, at point C, Ben is now travelling further. So therefore, he must be travelling to the football practice. So at point D, Ben must have arrived at the football practice. And between point D and E, Ben is travelling back home. Now, in the second question, it's asked us in which section is Ben travelling the fastest. Now, Ben's going to be travelling the fastest on the steepest line here in the graph. Now, the steepest line here is between points D and E. Now, it's asked us where was Ben at point D of the graph. Now, you might remember that at point C to D, he was travelling to football practice. At point D, he would have turned around to go home. So at point D, he was at football practice. And then it's asked us, what is the total distance that Ben has travelled? To be able to work that out, we actually need to work out how far Ben has travelled in each leg of the journey. Now, between A and B, he's travelled a total of 10 kilometres here. So we're going to start with the 10 kilometres. Between B and C, he hasn't gone anywhere, so that's 0 kilometres. Then between C and D, he travelled another 20 kilometres. We can tell that by reading the y-axis. So it's 20 kilometres in here. So we need to add the 20 kilometres to our journey. Then between D and E, he went from that 30 kilometre mark all the way back to 0. So he travelled another 30 kilometres. So we need to add another 30 kilometres here. So therefore, Ben has travelled a total of 60 kilometres. So as you can see, we can use a line graph to help us interpret some information from a situation. But now, I'd like for you to have a go at creating a story of your own. So my challenge to you today is to use this graph that I've given you to create a story of your own. I want you to create a 300-word story that considers the units provided for both the distance and the time. I want you to choose a character that could be placed in a scenario where they travel such a great distance. It's important in your story to explain their travelling and rest breaks and discuss the speed of their travel along the way. I want you to find a reason why they don't return to their starting point within the time frame. And most importantly, I want you to be creative. So, give it a go.